Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with Zoe Grunewald, political correspondent at The Independent, and Ryan Sabey, deputy political editor of The Sun. Welcome to both of you. So, as ever, let's kick off with the front pages, shall we? Starting with the Metro, the Prime Minister, it says, insisting the first flight carrying migrants to Rwanda will take off in July. No ifs, no buts. But some of his Tory peers don't agree. They are saying the plan won't work. That's the lead for the Eye. It's also on the front of the Daily Mail. They say the planes have been booked and migrants will soon be detained, ready for removal. The Times also has the Prime Minister's plans to push on with the Rwanda Bill. On its front page, the government has reserved 2,200 detention spaces for the first round of deportations. The government officials have said those deportations will begin as soon as Mr Sunak's Rwanda Bill gains royal assent and the new treaty with the African country was ratified, which is expected to happen this week. That is the lead for The Telegraph. The Guardian features an exclusive interview with the Met Police Commissioner, Mark Rowley, who has praised the professionalism of the police sergeant who anti-Semitism campaigner at a pro-Palestinian march at the weekend had criticised. The Daily Mirror has an exclusive with a facial comparison expert who says a man wanted for questioning over the murder of TV star Jill Dando 25 years ago bears a striking resemblance to a Serbian assassin. And the Financial Times has Donald Trump arriving in court for the first day of his hush money trial on its front page. The FTSE also the lead story there. Let's head to the Commons, shall we, first of all? An amendment being voted on right now. We are anticipating that, of course. One left, effectively, sent back by the Lords, their demand that there should be an independent monitoring committee looking at whether Rwanda was safe or not. So the government now voting on this. Another committee about effectively Afghan veterans or people who had helped in Afghanistan help the UK government. There seems to have been an agreement on that. So let's bring in our guests then to talk about this as we look at these pictures. Zoe Grunewald and Ryan Sabey, welcome to both of you. And Ryan, why don't you talk us through? Is this the last stage, or after this it'll go back to the Lords, won't it?
Yeah, so you can see right now in the House of Commons that you have the tellers moving up towards where the Speaker sits, and they're just about ready to reveal the result. The MPs would have gone through those division lobbies. They're all waiting there for that result to come in. And you've got three of the tellers there. They're waiting for one more to come in and actually tell the result. It's just a few seconds away.
Order. Let's listen, shall we?
The ayes to the right were 312. The noes to the left were 237.
The ayes to the right, 312. The noes to the left, 237. So the ayes have it, the ayes have it. Unlock.
So a majority for the government there. Do you want to throw out, effectively, this Lord's Amendment was the question they were faced with, about independent monitoring, looking at whether Rwanda was safe or not? And Zoe, a comfortable majority once again for the Commons as it goes back to the House of Lords this evening.
Yeah, so it's going to go back to the House of Lords now, and we're going to either see the Lords push forward again with this particular proposal, or we're going to see them back down. I think at this point we know, as Rishi Sunak set out earlier today at the presser, that he's very much expecting this piece of legislation to pass tonight and to be signed in by the King probably tomorrow. At this point, the question for the Lords will be, how strongly do they feel about this, or is it now time to let this legislation pass, let the government do its job, and let the people get this manifesto promise from the Conservatives, which of course is their Rwanda legislation.
Problem is for the newspapers, we've had all the first editions already. Here they are. She wafts them around, and yet we've not yet had this crucial final stage of this. It's going to happen, we think, around midnight, don't we? So perhaps a slightly different tack from the newspapers. Let's take a look at the Eye. The Rwanda plan won't work, Tory critics tell Sunak. You've got to find a way of doing the story without it actually being the result, haven't you?
That's right. right. You've got some great language from Rishi Sunak, and from a journalistic point of view. Enough is enough. No ifs, no buts. We've actually heard that many times before. You can go back to David Cameron. You can go back to Theresa May, all talking about how they want to get immigration under control. But this is Rishi Sunak's no ifs, no buts moment, and he's saying that those flights will actually take off. He wants them to take off in the next 10 to 12 weeks, and then there will be a regular rhythm of flights that take off before the summer.
Yeah, and if we move on to the Daily Mail, enough is enough. Some of the language you were talking about, we're ready for Rwanda liftoff. And certainly Rishi Sunak was at pains to point out the detailed planning that had gone into this, and that an airfield and an airline had been booked to remove these people.
Because one of the criticisms that's been levied at the government over the past few weeks is you may want to pass this legislation, but how much are the operational details, actually put into practice? So do you have an airline that's prepared to put these flights into practice? Is there somewhere for migrants to go when they arrive in Rwanda? And now Rishi Sunak has come forward and said, all this is ready. It all now just lies in the hands of the Lords and the Labour Party to pass this legislation and let the government get on with it. And I think at this point we are going to see now, finally, after years of actually battling and trying to get this put into law, we're going to see it actually be ratified. But the question now is it going to work? Are we going to see legal challenges? Is it actually going to act as a deterrent, as the Conservative Party are claiming? And actually, as we can see from the eye, even Tory MPs are saying they're concerned about the feasibility of this legislation. So it by no means is the end, unfortunately, for listeners, of the Rwanda debacle after tonight.
Yeah. Yes, Tory sources close to the scheme believe the figure is too optimistic. The figure they're talking about, Sunak challenged to send 2,000 migrants in 6 months, but admits the first deportation flight will not depart until the summer. The Metro PM We Fly in July. He's made promises about this, but why is this date? Why is the when so important here?
I think it's that build-up to the general election. I think you've got the time frame over the summer. It looks like he's actually doing something about it, and he's put so much emphasis on this. This is a deal that was actually signed. It was Priti Patel, who was Home Secretary back in April 2022. She went out to Rwanda, signed the paperwork, and we're only just seeing it now going into legislation. And we haven't even actually seen a plane get off the ground. Now, I think there could be only one thing worse than actually not getting this legislation passed for the government, is actually getting it passed, because they've said this is a deterrent. What happens then if boats still come over? And that's the trouble for them. They've still got this problem of getting people over to Rwanda, and actually boats still coming over here.
Yes, and the Labour mantra, more Home Secretaries have gone to Rwanda than migrants. We've heard that many a time, haven't we? But it poses difficulties if this happens. Big ifs, as we can see from the coverage tonight. If it does happen and it starts to become a deterrent, does Labour still junk it? There are questions for them.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think the Labour Party, I'm sure, will respond accordingly. But it's a sticky policy for them, because on the one hand, immigration is, for some voters, it is a key priority. So they don't want to seem like they are soft on it. If they are going to oppose the Rwanda legislation, they need to present a viable alternative. One thing the Conservative government does say is actually the Rwanda legislation is just part of a broader set of measures that they are implementing to get illegal immigration and net migration down. So, but one of the big things, as we know, is the introduction of safe and legal routes, and also being able to have the mechanisms in place in the Home Office to deal with immigration. So you would hope that the Labour Party would be talking about those things as well. But you're right, if we do see, and I'm very sceptical, but if we do see that the Rwanda scheme becomes successful, you might see a shift in tone, at least, from the Labour Party on whether they will proceed with it.
Well, let's just, talk about the legal routes as pertaining to Afghans. And certainly one of the really big sticking points for the House of Lords was what happens to those Afghans who had helped Allied forces in Afghanistan, and there seems to have been some agreement, doesn't there? The government has backed down on that.
There was a slight form of words from the dispatch box from the minister, who gave the peers in the House of Lords enough wriggle room to actually think we can actually get on side, and being rest assured that the amendment was going to be adhered to in a way that they found fit. So I think they're happy on that point, and that they backed down, but they obviously didn't let go on the other one. But I think on we go back to talk about whether Labour will actually go ahead with it. If this scheme is actually successful, and they get into power, at the end of the year, are they actually just going to get rid of it straight away? I mean, it's not exactly going to be a vote winner, and so you do have to raise questions about whether they would actually get rid of it, if they do get into power.
When you say that, I mean, where is polling on Rwanda? Is it actually popular? I mean, you're possibly coming at it from different political standpoints. So you go first.
I mean, I don't think it is particularly popular. And I think the other thing to note is that even the voters who do like the Rwanda legislation or like the principle of the Rwanda legislation, many of them will only deem it to have worked if it genuinely has quite an instant impact on the number of small boat arrivals. And I think we are all in agreement that that's probably not going to happen. It's going to take some time to see that deterrent effect if there is one. And I don't believe there will be, because there were 30,000 or thereabouts small boat crossings last year. The Rwanda scheme can take about 2,000 people. I mean, if you were desperately trying to cross the channel, I would still very much fancy my chances. So I don't believe it's going to act as a deterrent. We've also got serious questions about the human rights consequences here. So I think...
Well, they say this bill deals with a lot of those problems raised by the Supreme Court.
And I think it might deal with some of them, but there are questions about whether you can put people on a flight. If you have heavily pregnant women, for example, can you put them on a flight to Rwanda? I don't think you can. So there are still plenty of those details that need to be ironed out. And I think at this point, there really is a failure from the Conservative government to realise that this isn't going to fix their problems. As I say, those who are supportive of the scheme want instant evidence that it's working, and I just don't think this is going to, even if it is successful, I don't think the success is going to be overnight.
And from your paper's readership, is it popular? Is it postbag filling stuff for you? Yeah,
this is the language that they like to hear. We've been hearing enough about it for the best part of 2 or 3 years. 2 or 3 years on this plan alone. But one thing that Labour want to do, they've actually spoken about, offshoring as well. So if they do, they may not like the Rwanda plan, but they would look to other countries, and the EU countries have also looked to it as well. So you just wonder whether everyone is actually ultimately going to end down this road. There is, to deal with the mass migration issue. Lots
of numbers thrown at us today by Rishi Sunak in terms of the preparation that's been done. The Times picks up on some of them, and also says the government, bottom paragraph down here, the government is refusing to say when it will begin detaining migrants amid concerns they would abscond, or they could abscond. Officials have identified 150 who arrived in Britain before March last year who were considered legally watertight cases. They have already been screened by Rwanda before their planned removal. The idea, as the paper says, that it could start within days. 2,200 detention spaces already ready, including judges, court space, etc., to get this going, Zoe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the government will have done. But one thing they'll really want is when this passes, they will want to get a flight off the ground as soon as possible to show that it works. And so absolutely makes sense that they will have already done a great amount of legal work here to identify people who might be eligible to fly to Rwanda, if that's the right wording to use. But as I say, the challenges are going to come in waves after this, because although you might have identified some people, there is no way you're going to make a dent in that 30,000 number. Plus, people tend to conflate legal migration and illegal migration as well. And you're not going to get, I don't think, the obvious and visual impact of the Rwanda legislation overnight. And I think that is really how people are going to judge the success of this scheme.
Well, is one flight enough? And the suggestion had been one flight equals a deterrent, and yet Beth Rigby, our political editor, putting the idea of what success looks like to Rishi Sunak today, and he says stopping the boats is success. That is a high watermark, isn't it?
Yeah, and it was also this morning that the Rishi Sunak actually said that the number of people who've come over across the Channel has gone down. We had Lord Carlisle tonight in the House of Lords actually said that they actually slipped out some figures during the press conference. So they'd gone up by 24%, and he actually said it was not a case of stop the boats, it's a case of stop the boasts. You actually want the government to actually calm down on their rhetoric and say, well, perhaps the numbers coming over across the Channel haven't actually gone down.
Well, they'd gone down last year, I suppose, and not the start this year. So it's undoing some of the cuts that they saw last year. Albania was one of the successes. Now it's Vietnamese, he's saying, is part of the problem. And they're hoping to also do a deal on that. So some of the detail of who is coming is quite interesting.
Yeah, I think so. And we're going to see, variations in trends over the years as we see different global conflicts emerging, different economic patterns. You tend to get different concerns flagged by the government about particular countries and an influx of migration from that. But I think all of this really is a distraction from many other policy problems that are going on in this country. I mean, more people care about the cost of living and the NHS than stopping small boats. I think a lot of people in this country are very sensitive to the plight of asylum seekers, and I think this conflation of illegal migration and genuine asylum seekers has become quite dangerous, really. So I think people also object to the Rwanda legislation on kind of moral grounds as well.
And so, final thought then: if it is, dangerous, why has Rishi Sunak put his name to it? Done the news conference today, and why choose this hill to die on, if I can put it that way?
I think illegal migration is one of the biggest issues. You look at, as we say, the cost of living crisis, the NHS, and I think tackling illegal migration is such an issue. And seeing those images, of people, arriving, on the south coast, it just doesn't look very good. It looks like, the country is meant to have taken back control. If anything, those pictures show that you haven't actually done that. And I think it's the imagery almost that plays into this.
Yeah, fascinating. And we watch and wait, see what happens later. Back to the Lords it goes. Could it be the last time? We'll find out later on. Lots more still to come, more of the papers to look at, including the former president on trial. Donald Trump's hush money case opens. Talk about that and more after this. Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview. With me once again, Zoe Grunewald and Ryan Sabey. Welcome back to both of you. Let's go stateside, shall we, to New York and the front page of the Financial Times, in fact, who've put Donald Trump on the front. Making history once again, the first former or current president to face trial in this way, Zoe.
It's quite a significant moment in history. And we've got yet even more to come with Donald Trump. We know he's facing several different accusations over his behaviour in office and beforehand. And this particular one, obviously, is about the prosecutors have said that Donald Trump tried to corrupt the 2016 election because he directed his team to buy the silence of porn actor Stormy Daniels, who had threatened to go public with the affair. So this is a question of whether Trump's actions in covering up this payment was akin to him trying to basically pressurise the result of the election, cover up his background. And, of course, Trump is absolutely defending his actions. His team have said he's been trying to protect his family, his reputation and his brand. And it's just another one of these extraordinary stories that are coming out about Donald Trump, who is likely to become the next president of the USA again. So,
do you think so?
Oh, very, very possibly, unfortunately. So, I mean, it's just extraordinary that we even had this conversation.
Ryan, about to say something there.
You just wonder whether every single time he comes up against the establishment, it just garners support for him. And his supporter base just, his voter share just goes through the roof every time.
The 2016 election campaign was all about free advertising, and this, the president, the porn star, and the alleged payments is all grist to the mill for journalists, isn't it? Shall we move on to the front page of The Guardian? They're exclusive, they say. Sir Mark Rowley, the Met Police Commissioner, has spoken to them, praising the professional conduct of the sergeant who stopped an anti-Semitism campaigner at a pro-Palestinian march. I'm sure people have seen the video of this and our footage of it as well. Where would your paper stand on something like this, Ryan, do you think?
I think when it comes down to sort of Gideon Falter, or any Jewish person, they should be able to go about their business, in their daily life. If they're going out on a Saturday and there's a protest on, they should be able to do what they want. However, it does become slightly cloudy when you've got this police officer now. You've got Sir Mark Rowley actually saying that he was professional in his conduct, and there have been questions raised about the video, if you've seen the short form of it or whether you've seen the actual long form of it. So you just wonder whether, lots of people have raised questions about whether was there any motive or disingenuous motive about the campaign against anti-Semitism campaigner. But the Sir Mark Rowley, the Met Police Commissioner, has come out to back his sergeant.
And Rishi Sunak said he had his backing as well today. There had been criticism, obviously, of the situation and the Met Commissioner too. But the point many police officers are saying that if this was two opposing sides of football, you also would not be allowed to move through the crowd. So, there is nuance, I suppose, to this, isn't there?
Yeah, I think so. And, you do ask the question if he hadn't have intervened and he'd been allowed to walk through and something had happened, if there'd been a scuffle or some, abuse hurled or something like that, would the police then be criticised for not having intervened? And I think that's all of this, everything the police have to do. They have to make operational decisions based on risk. And I think in this particular circumstance, though the policeman might not have expressed himself in the most sensitive of terms, I think what he was doing was genuinely trying to protect Mr. Falter. And I think he was trying to prevent any possible skirmish happening. And that is, after all, the police's job. So I think really calling for the resignation of the police commissioner on the back of this, I think is a bit extreme, to be honest. I think you could have a conversation with the officer about his language, but I think ultimately it was the right operational decision to be made.
It's very easy sometimes for politicians to call for the head of the Met Police Commissioner, but you've had the Prime Minister, you've had the Home Secretary, James Cleverly, and you've had Sadiq Khan all pretty much giving the backing today.
Yes, and Commissioner Rowley, I completely understand why the sergeant made this assessment. A couple of turns of phrase were clumsy and offensive, and we've apologised for that, but also saying that officers at other protests had been set up by activists using fakery to undermine the force. So clearly it's an issue they're aware of. Zoe, Ryan, thank you both very much indeed. Plenty more still to come, of course, from you later. Thank you for now. Let's take a look at the weather.